The neighbor had left a note on the door about the howling. Derek read it on his way inside from the garage, carrying groceries, thinking about the estimate for the deck repair and whether they could afford it this year. He read the note and made a mental note to apologize later, and went inside and found Kodiak in the kitchen doorway doing exactly what the note described. Kodiak was a 3-year-old Siberian Husky whose relationship with sound was, by any fair assessment, he howled at certain commercials. He had, on one memorable occasion, howled at a documentary about the ocean for 45 minutes. He was not a quiet dog. Derek and Simone, with the specific warmth of love that has done its calculations and decided the balance still works. What Kodiak was doing now was different. Derek could see it immediately. The howling was not the ocean documentary howl, or the fire truck howl, or any of the other howls he had cataloged over 3 years. This was lower, less performance and more statement. Kodiak was standing in the kitchen doorway with his nose pointed toward the back of the stove and howling in a sustained, unchanged note that did not modulate, did not drop, did not stop when Derek said his name. Derek set down the groceries. He said Kodiak's name twice more. The dog looked at him for 1 second, then looked at the stove, then resumed. Derek went to the stove. It was off. The burners were off. The oven indicator light was not on. He turned on the overhead fan. He sniffed, which he knew was limited as a diagnostic tool. He had smelled nothing. He checked the burner knobs, turned them all individually to confirm they were in the off position, and they were. He went to find Simone. She was upstairs with their daughter Amara, doing the bath time negotiation that happened every Tuesday because Tuesday was apparently Amara's appointed night to object to water. He told Simone about Kodiak. She said, "The neighbor's note?" He said, "No, this is different. Come down." She came down. Kodiak was still in the kitchen doorway. Still the same note. They stood and watched him for a moment. Simone said, "What is he smelling?" Derek said he didn't know. They both looked at the stove. The dispatcher took the information. She said a technician would be there within the hour, and asked them to leave the windows open and avoid using any electrical switches in the kitchen if possible. She said the words "in case of gas accumulation" in a tone that was professional and unhurried, which was somehow more alarming than urgency would have been. They took Amara and Kodiak outside to the front porch to wait. If you stay for stories about what animals sense, before we do, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The gas technician's name was Paul. He was at their house. He used a combustible gas detector, a yellow instrument that produced a digital reading, and worked systematically through the kitchen. Behind the stove, the reading spiked at the connection between the flexible gas supply line and the stove's inlet fitting. It was a microfracture. The technician said, "The fitting is threaded, and the thread had stripped slightly, almost certainly from installation. A very small amount of gas had been leaking into the space behind the stove. Not enough to smell, not enough to trigger an alarm at any threshold the detectors were calibrated to catch." He said, "Your dog has a better sensor than what I carry in my truck." Then he got his tools and fixed the fitting. He said, on his way out, that in his experience, a dog alerting to a gas leak before any human could detect it was not unusual. He said he had taken 3 calls in the past year where the initial detection had been a dog. He said, they smell it at parts per billion. We smell it, if we're lucky, at parts per million. Tell us in the comments. The neighbor, whose name was Harriet, came by the next evening. She had heard from another neighbor what happened. She stood on the porch and said she was sorry about the note and that she had not known. Simone told her it was fine. Harriet said, "How do you train a dog to do that?" Harriet went home. Simone sat on the porch steps and Kodiak pressed himself against her leg, and they sat together in the evening. The gas technician had told them on his way out that at the rate of leakage he'd measured, the accumulation behind the stove might have reached a detectable human threshold in another 40 to 50 minutes. He hadn't said what comes after a detectable threshold in a kitchen. He didn't need to. Derek had done the math later, sitting at the kitchen table with the repaired stove behind him, and Amara asleep upstairs. He had thought about 47 minutes. He had thought about the neighbor's note, which he had almost tucked in his pocket and not mentioned. He had thrown the note away. Every garden deserves to be recognized, even the ones the neighbors have complained about twice. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. He still howls at fire trucks, at certain commercials. Derek and Simone no longer interpret any of this as noise. They interpret it as information. That is, they have learned the correct approach. The next story at this channel involves a dog who spent weeks tracking something invisible, and the family who finally understood what it meant.